everyone, and welcome to Atlanta Motorsports Park. And this, I'm going to call it already, this, the most controversial motorcycle of 2021, the model year 2022 Yamaha YZF-R7. How dare they call it the R7? Well, before we get into what this bike is, let's first talk about what the new R7 is not. This is not a replacement for the legendary R7 OW02 of the early 2000s. This is not going to be a World Superbike competing or even a World Supersport level motorcycle. And if you're sad about that, well, that's just too bad. The whole genesis behind the new current generation of the R7 goes back pretty much to 2008 and the height of sport bike sales. Sport bike sales tanked after 2008, and a lot of it was there were so many R6s on the used market that it kind of flooded the market. At the same time, a new R6 was creeping up higher and higher in price, almost rivaling that of the R1, which kind of came around to like, well, then why would I buy a new R6 when I can either buy an R1, which many people shouldn't have done, or they can buy a used R6 for cheap. Yamaha did focus groups, conducted a lot of focus groups, which may, be that death word for some of you, but in those focus groups, an overwhelming majority of people who rode sport bikes or sporty bikes, and even R6s in this case, came to some conclusions. They wanted a sporty looking bike, they wanted affordability, and when they asked, why not just pick up an MT-07 or something, was because they wanted that racy-ish look. So when asked in these focus groups, where are you riding the R6? They're riding it really in the mid-range, where the R6 makes no power. R6s are meant to make power way up top on the rev range. So Yamaha realized the formula for the successor to the R6, if you want to call it that, even though Yamaha doesn't call it that, we all are going to call it that. The formula goes, you need a racy looking bike, you need affordability, and you need mid-range usable power. Well, fortunately for Yamaha, they have an engine in the MT-07 that is just that, has usable, fun, exciting power that's not peaky like the R6 was, and they've got that chassis that, let's just say it, it's cheap. And what they came up with was this. The 2022 YZF-R7 at $9,000, actually $8,999, but who's counting? So now we've covered what the R7 is not and the history behind the R7. And at this point you're wondering, if you're still watching and you're probably pissed off, this is not an R7, sorry, but this is the bike we've got, and it's a damn good, fun motorcycle. Here's the package we have here. Yes, this is the frame and the swing arm from the MT-07. With some choice differences though. The actual rake angle is steeper than the MT-07. Trail numbers are a little lower than the MT-07, so it changes direction pretty quick, really quick actually. Wheelbase is actually a little bit longer than the MT-07. Your triple clamp, the offset is shorter, which means the distance from the center where the headstock to the fork is shorter than it is on the MT-07, which helps with geometry and making it flick directions quicker. Obviously, you've got the inverted fork. And then these side plates down here are stiffer than on the MT-07 for more torsional rigidity. One of the complaints with the MT-07 was it was a wet noodle when you were trying to, really ride it hard and fast. The change with the side plates, the inverted fork, the triple clamp, offset, all help towards making that more rigid feeling that people wanted from the R7. You also got the radial brakes. You've got a radial Brembo master cylinder, the first time that's been done on a Yamaha. But the engine itself, pretty much the same engine that you would find in the MT-07, except for one key detail. It has an assist and slipper clutch. So actually that means, in addition to banging off downshifts sloppily, if you are that kind of person without much fear of the rear end getting crazy on you, that also allows lighter clutch springs, so the actual pull on the clutch is really light. And then, to top it all off, This is actually the narrowest R bike in the Yamaha family. R1, R3, even the R6. This is narrower than all of those bikes. And if I sit on it, like, it just feels super narrow between my thighs, and I can still get into a tuck and put my chin right here in this little divot. Narrow, but still has plenty of room to move about and, you know, do those sporty, racy sport bike things that people like to do on these kinds of bikes. So we've got all that covered. This particular bike and the bikes we're riding today all have the optional $200 quick shifter, which you should just go out and buy if you're really going to buy one of these things. Quick shifters are just money. The unfortunate thing, though, is it doesn't work if you choose to do the race shift, GP shift, reverse shift pattern, however you want to call it, because of the strain gauge and yada yada yada. Point being, standard shift, quick shifter, it works great in that one direction. So we've got the past, we've got the present. So how is it to ride? This is a bare bones elemental motorcycle in the middleweight twins category, which is my personal favorite. We're talking 70-ish, 80-ish horsepower, sub 400 or right about 400 pounds. It's just that sweet spot of a motorcycle where experienced riders can feel just like gods riding this thing, feel like they're riding the bike and the bike's not riding them. People coming up from smaller displacement bikes can hop on this and immediately feel at home. It's just so inviting, forgiving, easy to ride quickly, no matter what your skill level is. Here at the racetrack, I mean, what an absolute gem. Like I said before, it changes direction super fast. Light and flickable was the very first thing that came into my mind after my first session on the bike. The compactness, the narrowness, and like I said, it's just so light. It's like a toy. It feels really fun. And then that power, it's deceiving. This engine likes to be in the mid-range and likes to have that mid-range pull. Once it gets up top, it kind of peters out, and it's absolutely not like the R6 where it wants to rev to the moon. This enjoys being in that mid to upper mid-range section of the RPM range, and then you can feel it kind of moving along pretty nicely. As for the chassis, the fork, the triples, the new side plates on the side here, it's not a major improvement over the MT-07, but it does help this R7 feel more composed, more solid, with more torsional rigidity than the MT-07. The MT-07, when you really start pushing things, you can feel it start to flex a little bit. This, you just have to push a little bit more to get to that level of sketch. And by the time I get to that level, I want to dial it back anyway. With the stock setup we have here, we added some preload, changed some compression and rebound damping, and the shock only has rebound damping adjustment and preload. So considering the confines we had to work with this stock motorcycle, we got it working pretty good and got moving pretty quick around Atlanta Motorsports Park. I can't stress it enough. It's just so much fun and elemental to ride. If you are an adventure rider out there, you are familiar with the Tenere 700, people love that because it's so elemental. Same thing here. Elemental, fun, basic motorcycle, and for $9,000. It's a great package for $9 grand. That said, there's some things I don't like about it. Number one, it's still got rubber brake lines, so you get hard on the brakes and you get a squishy lever. Meh, you know, that's easily fixed. The ABS on this bike does not shut off. There's no button for that. There is a way to pull it, to turn it off. Requires some fuses and removal of them, and the legal team might not like it I say that, but we didn't do that here. So you really have to be mindful of how you ride the bike so you don't engage the ABS, because once you do, things get kind of squirrely. The LCD gauge cluster under direct light, it's kind of hard to read. That said, the way it looks in itself, it's really sophisticated, so it does look nice in that way. There's no TC on this bike, there's no ride modes. It's all right here in the wrist, and you get all the power all the time, and there's no changing any of it, which is kind of nice, just to have a really cool, basic, solid bike. And yeah, that wraps things up with the R7. If you're sad or mad about the R7 name, well, that's just too bad. The likelihood is you've probably never ridden an R7 anyway, the original one, and that was 20 plus years ago. It's time to get over it and move on. This new R7 is kind of what Yamaha's hinging on to carry that super sport lineage into the next generation of motorcycle riders. And in that regard, you know, today's current crop of 20-year-olds or whatever who are kind of tight on money, but want a cool sporty package, the R7 for $9 grand is a really good place to look. So there you have it, my quick thoughts on the 2022 Yamaha YZF-R7. I'll have more to say in the written, typed out form at Motorcycle.com. So go there, read my review, and see you next time.